I'm Marianne Williams. I've been a member of St. Francis for 35 years and joyful to be part of this.
Hi, and I'm Paul Williams. I've been a member of St. Francis with Marianne for 35 years, and glad to be here.
My name is Claudine Harris. I'm a member of Baptist Grove Church and have been a member for about 11 years now. So I'm really very glad to be a part of this effort.
I am Keith Shannon. I serve in the Deacon's ministry at Baptist Grove Church and also the social justice ministry. Been at Baptist Grove just over 20 years.
I'm Chris D'Amico, and I'm a parishioner here at St. Francis, and I have been a parishioner for about 11 years.
And I'm Michael Clay. I'm the pastor of St. Francis of Assisi. Been here about 2.5 years.
Okay, so folks, you have been on an extraordinary journey, and can you share with us what this experience was like? Take us on the journey with you. What happened? What was your experience like? What did you get out of this journey?
Well, for me, this energized me. I'm a seasoned citizen, and I've had many experiences. And when I saw the opportunity to go into the Deep South to see some of the things that I'd read about, I jumped at the opportunity. And as I said, I'm seasoned, so I had sort of said, well, you know, let the younger folks do these things. But after seeing some of the things there in the Deep South, and I'll let the other people discuss that as well, it could not do anything but energize me and make me say, what can I do? I need to do more.
Keith, what was your experience like?
So I was encouraged, was motivated, inspired, and it was a necessary journey for me to travel with friends that I normally don't communicate with day to day, and it was a joy to see the two churches, go outside of the church picnic or the annual celebration around Easter or Christmas to fellowship together. So it gave an opportunity for us to get to know one another and to get a little bit deeper than just our religious differences. And particularly our racial awareness was heightened for me.
I was very touched. I had read and seen videos about the Children's March in Birmingham, and was so joyful to walk through Kelly Ingram Park, think about the children, how pleased and happy they were to be part of it, and their parents worrying about them with the brutal treatment that they knew they would receive.
Taking the racial equity and justice classes through Just Faith that have been offered here at the parish for the past few years gave us a lot of book knowledge. We read some really challenging books and had some challenging discussions, and a lot of soul searching. But this trip for me was important to take because it, and I didn't realize how important it would be, because when you put a visual context, when you're standing in the places where a lot of civil rights giants walked, it was very emotional. It was a spiritual experience, and it just helped me put all that knowledge that we learned through Just Faith into some context. And it left me with the question, what do I do with this?
Yeah, I think that similar to Paul, going through Just Faith as well as our stories, I had a lot of book knowledge, head knowledge, as well as things that I've heard and things that I had seen. Similar to our stories, I thought this was an amazing opportunity to be able to be in communion and share stories and listen to stories. It was also brought up several times by a couple of folks, knowing a lot of these things, hearing a lot of these things, but even as I feel myself shaking right now, the visceral reaction that I was able to just experience full body, the conversations on the bus, the opportunities in different museums where you were on the phone call with someone who was behind bars. Some of the museums, the conversations and the things that were said in the 50s and 60s. The opportunity to journal and to sit with my thoughts. I think, like Keith said, not only bringing the churches together, but really reminding myself what it really means to partake in the Eucharist and to live as a member of Christ, and maybe most importantly, how to love. And so I'm exiting this experience, just really trying to think about how can I better love. Thanks.
I would echo some of what Paul said as a professor in my previous ministry before coming to St. Francis. I taught courses in multicultural ministry, and we would always have a unit on racism. And moving that from a two-dimensional reality on books and articles, and even teaching it with really no African Americans present in the classroom, to being in the midst of this reality that was inescapable, but now seeing it in a three-dimensionality really brought really impacted me in terms of what it is that African Americans have been living with for 400 years in this country. There is still a sense of the dehumanization that continues to this day. The system continues to be rigged against African American people, and that became crystal clear in the time that I spent with this wonderful group of people visiting these shrines that are attempting to wake us up to this reality and to help us to understand that we have, there's a responsibility that we bear to make a difference and to do something that's going to truly make a difference in all of our lives, but especially those who are of African American heritage. Just to see the brutality and the dehumanization of anybody, to have your humanity taken away from you, to have your families torn apart intentionally as a way to continue to dehumanize you, to even be known in documentation that you're not even a human being, was just mind-blowing to me. Again, I knew this theoretically, but I got to see it in a way that I'd never understood before.
So as a black man in America, I'm proud of the history of America, even though there is the brutality and the two-ness of the world that I have to live in. And so I was so encouraged last week on this journey by the courage of my white brothers and sisters that were willing to look into my world. And so, it has been a struggle. No, I was never whipped. I was never a slave. But that part of America is a part of me. And I'm proud of the fact that African Americans have lived through that and yet still stand or still sit. And so again, I'm encouraged by the courage of those that didn't have to come on this journey, but did, and we had some fun. We had some
Yes.
fun,
That-
you know, getting to know each other and just hanging out and talking about how similar we are, but not trying to whitewash or make America's history disappear.
Well, I think this trip is important for two reasons. One is the fact that the two congregations came together. And I was encouraged by the exchange in the small groups, you know, sitting at the dinner table or in the breakfast area and just exchange and said, what did you think about that? Or what impacted you the most today? And that was like a great way of exchanging and learning from each other. And someone said, oh, I like that question you asked. What do you think about this? And that exchange is what is going to, I believe, be the foundation as we go forward in this movement. I hope this is not the last journey to the South. I think that it's a ripple effect. I heard someone use that term, ripple effect. So if you think about a ripple, when you put that little stone in the water, it ripples out. But what you have to continue to keep that ripple going. You can't just stop.
Yeah, I think to that point as well. As a white person, I have come to recognize and understand that I don't understand. I just don't. And I can seek clarity. I can try to understand more, but I don't have to experience day in and day out. However, ignorance is not an option. Mm-hmm. And I have been touched in a way that I can't go back. The last couple of years, as it's been shared, there's been a lot of, specifically for me, book learning and listening. But as has been mentioned, when you share meals, when you share stories, when you hug, when you hold, when you're on the bus for hours, we lived together for 5 days.
Yes.
And yet, in some aspects, as Msgr pointed out, we're talking and sharing experiences of 400 years ago, and yet it still exists. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to have experienced, to be able to call more people sisters and brothers in Christ, but also to understand, while I don't necessarily know what's in store for me tomorrow as a result of this, and yet I look forward to those conversations, I do know that as a white person, when I see something or hear something, it's my responsibility to say something. And so that is something with my daughter, with my stepson, with various groups of people that I am around. I want to continue to uphold my end of the bargain, because I don't day in and day out live and experience this, to share the type of community that I want to be a part of. And I'm just so grateful to be able to feel that, not just say that, but able to feel that, because these memories, these friendships, these conversations, the love that's on this panel, and with so many people on that bus, is something I'll feel the rest of my life.
I'm very proud of St. Francis of Assisi as a community of faith. I think it's rare to see something like this happening today. I think it happened more commonly back in the 50s and the 60s when people were really working for basic human rights, civil rights, and voting rights. It would be my hope that these kinds of exchanges, this kind of mutual learning and respect, sitting at each other's feet and learning what we don't know, can help us to build more and more bridges. And I can see St. Francis of Assisi being a leader among Catholic communities here just in the Raleigh area and beyond, to help us to grow more and more into this solidarity that's so important. It's one of the essential social teachings of the Church, solidarity, and I got to see it in reality, and I will never forget that experience. But I just keep remembering Jesus' words that were often quoted by Pope John Paul II, fear is useless, what is needed is trust. And I think what we saw this weekend, this past week, was an experience of building trust, building relationships that I think will bear good fruit for a long time. Yeah.
I think there are many opportunities. Maybe not everybody can go on a 5-day trip as we were lucky enough to do, but there are many opportunities with One Wake and working with lots of other churches for the good of the community, for participating in the Our Stories program to hear the experiences of others, and therefore we can continue to that ripple effect that Claudine mentioned.
And I'd like to echo a lot of what's been said. The kind of two aspects to our trip. We went to all these sites and museums, and we got to see all those things and experience the powerfulness of how things were, how our shared history was presented. And but then we all came back together. We all went out, and then we all came back together every night on the bus and at the dinner table. And the discussions that we had, that I were a part of, was beautiful. People shared from their hearts. I think nobody held anything back. We listened. We felt we shared funny stories, and we shared a lot of tears too. And we did it together. And I think it was really that aspect of the trip for me that was the most impactful. You never know how the chemistry of 35 people are going
Yes,
to
that's true. That's
blend
true.
together. But it just worked out beautifully. The presence of God was always with our trip.
Yep.
We started and never ended each day with a prayer from, and everybody. We had a lot of people have an opportunity to give those prayers from the heart, and they were from the heart. So I'll always be grateful for how each person added their own piece of themselves to this trip, and from the most extroverted person to the most introverted, it was a beautiful experience to see people grow together and develop those relationships with each other.
I really want anybody that is looking at our discussion and reflection of the week to know that this wasn't happenstance.
Mm-hmm.
The years, even before Msgr Clay was here, before Pastor Akinbenyu was at Baptist Grove, I believe God was working us up to again this necessary time, and a lot of prayer went into the organizing of this opportunity for us to join together. And on the core organizing committee, we didn't know who was going to sign up, or what they were bringing to the bus. But I believe that God put us together for this journey. And when we were at the Freedom Ride Museum and hearing that's in Montgomery, and hearing the story of the original Freedom Riders, I saw us as a modern day Freedom Ride. And so I'm convicted. I have to go back. I have to go back on the journey again with some of the same people and with some new people. As Harriet Tubman went back, they say some hundreds of times back to the South. Some people will never see it and will never take that step to go, and that's okay. You know, some people are at different stages in their awareness. But we took the time to bathe this journey in prayer before we got together. We took the time to come up with a mission that would be accepted by both of our pastors and our parishes and congregations, and attached a biblical verse to it, and it was love one another. Mark 12, verse 30, 31. So this is a movement. You used the word movement, and we just happen to be in this space and time, and I'm ready to continue to do my part.
And I think that we have a responsibility after having experienced this, and because it was an experience, to take that experience and share it with others, our children, our grandchildren, and tell them what is the real truth. Because let's face it, it's not being taught in the schools.
Right.
So unless we take the word forward, it may be lost. So we need to do that lest we forget the pain, the struggle, the advantages and disadvantages that our forefathers have paid and that we are still paying right now. And when you think about what's going on in our country right now, there's a lot to be done. So we can't rest on our laurels. We have to go into action.
On this journey, what surprised you the most? That's the first quick question.
I think what surprised me the most was in Selma how divided it still is, how poor the environment is and services for the black community versus the white community.
I guess what surprised me was my reactions to what I saw. I had really no expectations of myself. I didn't really understand or have an idea of what I was going to see. And I guess I was surprised by how emotional I felt seeing seeing the things in the museums that were depicting the life of a person coming into our country as a slave.
Well, I wasn't really surprised because I've lived a lot of that. If not being there personally, I've experienced racism in the North and in the South. But I will tell you what did surprise me was the emotional impact of hearing Dr. Martin Luther King's speech of I Have a Dream. It still moves me in my heart today. So that to me, really, because I'm emotional even now.
What surprised me was the enormous favor that God placed us in. We didn't have any hiccups, didn't have any struggles. Things went miraculously well for 35 people that were joining together, and everybody let down their guard from the time they brought their knapsack on the bus. And so that favor, that amount of favor surprised me.
Yeah, I might echo what's been said as far as community. One of the stops, and I'm forgetting where it is, but Martin Luther King talked about the beloved community. And I think Keith gave me the opportunity to read that at one of the museums. And I think that's what we've done here, is establish community between not just the two churches, but really a sister and a brotherhood that is in our hearts and will be forever with us. So how quickly many of us who were either complete strangers or acquaintances could build bonds and grow together as a family. And then also, why couldn't more of that been done? The chance or the courage that was talked about now, 400 plus years later, how few people did that. Maybe we wouldn't be in quite the mess we're in.
I think what shocked me the most, and there were lots of shocking moments in this trip, but I think the thing that shocked me the most, that I'm still scratching my head about, was visiting Selma, which is 87% black. It has a community college that's named after George Wallace. And that college, which was established in 1963, still retains the name of George Wallace. The irony of that just is staggering to me. And I'm sure that if you dig below the surface, there's an awful lot of politics involved in why that still has not changed. And I think that it speaks to a deeper reality that we can never lose sight of, that there is a real struggle still to be undertaken to make the kind of progress that we need to make.
Well, we're almost out of time, and I just have one last quick, get your short answer to this. If Martin Luther King Jr. were here today, right now, sitting here where I am, what would you say to him?
I'd say thank you for inspiring us. Thank you for being so persistent and drawing people in, which is what I think he did the best, of drawing people in who were resistant to change.
I would say thank you. Thank you for having the courage to stand up and to take the criticism from white people, from black people, to just stand up to do what is right.
I'd say thank you for your sacrifice, for your service, for laying the groundwork for what is yet to come.
And I would say, Dr. King, in 39 years, you only wrote a few books, but the one that was entitled Why We Can't Wait, I see why you wrote that.
I would say thank you for knowing in your heart and the speeches that you shared that more than likely you were not going to be along for the ride. And you moved forward anyways, knowing that this dream, whenever it was going to be realized and self-actualized, was something that you were willing to not only give of yourself, but give of your life. And I'm grateful for these people and for the continued conversations that you've inspired to be able to help manifest that for you. Thank you, Dr. King.
I would say help us who have become amnesiacs to what the real power of nonviolent resistance. As I see violence becoming more normative in our attempts to handle the questions of racism and injustice, what you taught us was so powerful and so effective, but at this point we seem to have forgotten this as a true value, and to have the courage and the faith that that way of life will really make a difference.
Thank you all for your time, for your thoughts, and for participating in this interview. Thank you very much. God bless you all.